Did you know for season 5 of Stranger Things, we get introduced to a couple new characters? One of them is Miss Harris, a teacher at Hawkins Elementary. Did you know that she is played by Hope Hines Love, who was actually the Duffer brothers' high school drama teacher? The brothers have credited her with inspiring their passion for filmmaking. I finally got around to seeing part 1 of season 5 of Stranger Things. I've been super busy, spending a lot of time with my family, with friends, celebrating Thanksgiving. I really hope every single one of you had an amazing Thanksgiving and had time to sit down and watch all these episodes, maybe even more than once. There's just so much for me to discuss. My excitement and the hype I had towards this season was very high, and part 1 really just got me intrigued. There's just so much I'm looking forward to come Christmas time. There's a lot of questions that still need answering. There's a lot of character developments that still need to happen. There's just so much that needs to happen. But this part 1 did a phenomenal job laying down the base work, laying down everything we need to know, getting the ball rolling with the next part. Starting first with the story and the characters, there are a lot of storylines in this one. I mean, Stranger Things has always had multiple storylines going at once, but I feel like these episodes had a lot more storylines happening and some backstories too. We got to see a little bit more into Hopper's backstory as a soldier, which I'm very, very happy with that, because I don't think they've ever really talked about Hopper being in the military, maybe in passing, but he's never actually gone into what he experienced, the loss, what it did to him. We see Hopper in his military mindset this time around, instead of just a typical police chief, which I love that. It's like the next level of Hopper. And then Dustin was probably my favorite storyline in the first couple of episodes. He's really going through it. Like he's very broken. He's very angry. Feels like he's alone. He doesn't have anyone to open up about his loss. Like Eddie was an amazing friend to Dustin, and Dustin is really like turning into Eddie with his mannerisms, with how he looks. I mean, he's trying to keep Eddie's spirit alive, even though it really seems like he's the only one who actually cares, right? I mean, Dustin's always been a little more vulnerable, a little more easy to target. We get to see a really good vulnerability in Dustin. A couple other characters that I really liked seeing storylines for is one, the big one is Holly. I'm really glad Holly's starting to get a lot more screen time. Holly never had much lines at all, much screen time. I mean, she was super young. She was there, here and there, like you didn't forget about her, but for some reason, the Duffer brothers are choosing to have Holly be a main character this time. A lot of story focused on her and her experience with Mr. Whatsit and being trapped in this illusion. It really feels like a lot of Alice in Wonderland, but also like foreshadowing her. Maybe she has psychic abilities. She's special, right? And then one kid that I did not see this change coming was Derek. Now, this kid, the kid who plays him, phenomenal job. I read that this is his first big acting role. He was in some commercials, but that's it. Like, he's making his debut, and I gotta say hats off, because he started out as that annoying kid, the kid you just wants to shut up, right? He really is that like annoying, dorky kid who gets on everybody's nerves. He's a bully, but at the end, he had some really funny moments, but also I think he's going to be pivotal. I think he's going to have a lot more important role to play in part 2 and part 3. He had a nice little character arc, nice little character development. So hats off to Jake Connelly, who played Derek Turnbow. And then the second thing I liked, I felt like this season so far has had the most references. Now, Stranger Things as a whole is really one big reference. Like, it's comprised of originality, but it's also comprised of so many different sci-fi and pulp culture references from the 80s and before. There's a lot of E.T. references. There's some Star Wars references. The whole thing's inspired by D&D. But I felt this season was really, at least right now, is really leaning heavily into 3 major references. Number 1 is Pennywise, Mr. Whatsit, is very similar to Pennywise. He's casting illusions of himself. He's making him seem like a friend. There was even a couple scenes where you see a red balloon leading a kid out of a school. That is straight from the first It movie. He invades people's minds. He feeds off of kids' fears. He needs kids for some reason. Like, that's very Pennywise. but then also a couple other big ones. A Wrinkle in Time, that's going to be a major reference throughout this part 2 and part 3, because mainly a lot of the premise of this, a lot of what Vecna is doing, is straight from A Wrinkle in Time. Now, I don't know much about it other than it involves this entity called It, which is a big brain controlling everything. And then the Dark Tower was also a big reference in this part. Stephen King, lots of Stephen King references. This is another big one. The Dark Tower, as in they're taking kids, they're kidnapping kids, and they're using them in experiments for their own personal gain. It all has to do with this big psychic takeover, this big bad coming in, and the kids are somehow important to that role. So many references. I'm sure I missed a few, but the big ones that jumped out to me were those 3. Third thing I loved, and just really hats off to all the actors. They just really stepped it up this season, but specifically these characters stepped it up. Karen and Will. I want to start with Karen. Now, she's always been a fun character. You know, she's had some great moments, but we get to see Karen go full mama bear. Man, what a scene. What an incredible scene of her standing up to that Demogorgon. It reminds me, it reminded a lot of people of Mrs. Weasley standing up to Bellatrix and Harry Potter. It's that same energy. Like, stay away from my daughter. Like, she was willing to take on a Demogorgon to save Holly. And then I cannot stress this enough. Noah Schnapp blew me away in this part, and he's only going to get better. But I'm not going to get into spoilers. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen the season finale of part 1. But let me just say, for that scene alone, if Noah hasn't won an Oscar for his performance at that scene, give him an Oscar right now, because that scene absolutely blew my freaking mind. I've never seen an actor go in like that toward a role. And it just leaves so many questions too. I'll get into that later, but like, it's building up. Like, we all knew season 5, at least one part, maybe 2 parts, would all be about Will. Will has always been integral to the story, and we get so many answers in this part to why Will is so important. And I can't stress enough, well done, Noah, for just giving us a character to cheer for. And so I cannot wait to see how Will is utilized in part 2 and part 3, because let me tell you, that scene will definitely go down in history as a scene we will not soon forget. The Sorcerer episode is the highest rated Stranger Things episode out of the entire series. If you care for ratings at all, it is at a 9.8 out of 10 on IMDb. And then, of course, I gotta tell you my theories. There's so many theories. There's so much going in my head right now of what to expect in part 2. You know, they're doing a great job of keeping a lot of things secret. Most of the stuff in the trailer for part 1 was from part 1. There's a couple things we still have to see. I'd say the first big theory I have is I want to know who's going to die in part 2. I gotta say, I was very, very surprised we didn't get any deaths in part 1. I thought either Ted or Karen was going to die, which would make sense, but they didn't. For some reason, Lucas could have been killed off, Hopper could have been killed off, but for some reason the Duffer brothers aren't killing, you know, they didn't kill anybody off in this first part, and I don't know why they didn't. Maybe it's to make us feel comfortable, and then they're going to hit us, they're going to gut punch us. Maybe that's what they're doing. Because I have a feeling we're going to lose more than one person in part 2, and for sure in part 3, I already know there's going to be an incredibly violent death. We still don't know who the violent death is going to be. I think it's either going to be Will or 11, just because that makes the most sense to me. But like, in terms of other characters, I think Jonathan is going to die. Now, if Steve dies, that is going to be like Game of Thrones level. I don't think Steve is going to die, but he could. He very well could. I think Robin's going to live. Dustin will probably live. I think Lucas is going to get killed off. Second theory, I wonder if we're going to get any new monsters, because I saw the next episode, and this episode focuses around this giant bat. I don't know much about it. I know it's all based on a creature from D&D, but also based on the date announcement, we see a shot of Will, and he's utterly terrified. Like, he is screaming run like I've never seen before. And to me, it's not a Demogorgon, it's not Vecna, and I don't think it's a Mind Flayer, because I don't think he would be that terrified of either 3 of those, because he's already had encounters with all 3. It would be something he's never had an encounter with. It would be something that he knows is like big bad, like maybe even worse than Vecna. Now, it could be the Mind Flayer, but in a different form. I think we're going to be getting that three-headed dragon that we've seen a couple times referenced in that painting, but also I believe it's been referenced in the game itself. I don't know what it's called. I don't know D&D like at all, so if you could help me out in the comments. Do you think it's going to be a specific dragon? I'm pretty sure it's going to be a three-headed dragon, but I think that's what it's going to be because I think that's the only thing that will get Will that terrified. So I'm very excited to see if we're going to get any new creatures in part 2 and part 3. Will's powers, so like I said, we get to see what happens to Will. Now, was this a one-time thing, or could Will tap back into it? But could Will also be corrupted by it? Because I feel like we're going to get a big plot twist with Will. It was amazing seeing him with what he was able to do. But knowing Vecna, I know Vecna said he has no more use for Will, but like I said, we haven't seen everything. Everything in the trailer has not been done yet. There's a voiceover that Vecna says. He says, "William, you're going to help me one last time." He hasn't done that yet. I think he's going to take advantage of Will's powers and turn Will into a vessel and turn him against people, and that's where we might get some deaths. Will has always been like that sleeper agent. He's always been able to be activated at any time because Vecna has always had control of him from the very beginning. And also, like I said, we're going to get some big storylines involving Vecna. Lots of backstory. We want to know more about Henry. Big thing we're going to see is why doesn't Henry go into that cave? Now, the thing that jumped in my head immediately was sexual assault. I think it might be because he was sexually assaulted in that cave once upon a time when he was young by either his father or some adult, and he's traumatized by that and he doesn't want to go into the cave. Or two, that's when he had one of his first encounters with the Mind Flayer and it traumatized him. And he was so scared, it left a mark on him that he doesn't want to go into that cave. This is the way Hollywood is, and kind of the thing that makes most sense logically is I think it's going to be a case of him being sexually assaulted, so he's very broken, very vulnerable, very open to the Mind Flayer's influence. But like I said, man, there's so much. I could go on for hours talking about all these different theories I have and thoughts I have. I'm going to rewatch these episodes again, but I can't wait to see what part 2 has in store for all of us. So for Stranger Things, Season 5, Part 1, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 Mudflaps. And remember, leave me a thumbs up and drop in the comments below. What are your theories for Part 2 of Stranger Things? See you soon.